Okay, well, let's just get started, I'd say. Thanks everyone for joining. This is the second of three webinars in kind of the informational summer series we've been putting together for Small Lots, Big Impacts. I think everyone on the call probably knows what we're doing, but essentially Small Lots, Big Impacts is an initiative with the mayor's office and the LA Housing Department to try to turn a handful, something like a dozen publicly owned sites into small multifamily developments to really try to show a way to build new starter homes in Los Angeles. So the first session was really focused on the RFQ. We've made some more progress on that with our city partners. Should have some more information to share in the coming weeks. And actually, the RFQ, we're aiming for that to be released at the end, by the end of September. So just about in the next month. This session is really going to be focused on both financing and development strategies that have worked in the past. So we have a really amazing panel of four developers and financial kind of financial brains, I guess, let's say, who have really done this kind of work in Los Angeles and across the country. And then the last session, I think is September 3rd, also a lunchtime session, is going to be focused on a couple of different housing policy topics that can show you how you might be able to leverage the small lots that we're having in this initiative to build some really great housing developments. So the way this is going to work is first we'll have some short presentations, 6, 7 minutes or so from each of the people on the panel here. And then probably the second half of the webinar, we'll have a Q&A session. So please, as they're presenting, ask any questions you have in the chat. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. We'll post the recording online afterwards and try to answer as well outstanding Q&A questions, as many of those as we can in the documents that we post afterwards. So I'll just do a brief introduction maybe of everyone, and then we can just you guys can just popcorn to the next person. First, we have Jonathan Tate, who's an amazing architect out of New Orleans in Louisiana. John was actually part of the, oops, okay, maybe you guys can still see us. Hopefully you still can. John was part of the jury for Small Lots, Big Impacts and has done a lot of really amazing work, actually both designing and self-developing projects of this scale all across the country. So he'll take a look and show you guys some of that work. Next, Alkarim Devani is going to talk. Al's a developer as well out of Calgary, of Canada, and starting to become a really great friend, both with a firm called Round Square that he's done some development, again, at this missing middle scale all across Canada, and now with an organization called Middle, MDDL, where he's been teaching people how to build this missing middle housing in Canada and hopefully expanding to the US soon. So Al will go next. Then after him, John Perfitt's going to talk. John's a local developer, been working in LA for many years now, mainly under let's say the moniker, maybe you know him best at RNLA, small affordable housing developer who's done a lot of really great work in the city. And then lastly is going to be Tom DeSimone. Tom's another kind of great friend, someone who's been on the project for a long time and also been helping us shape small lots really since the beginning. Tom works for an organization called Genesis LA that invests in finances, housing and other developments all across Los Angeles too. So that'll be the sort of breadth of experience from all four of them, and then we'll get into some questions. So John, do you want to go ahead and take it away? Jonathan Tate, that is.
Yep, for sure. Let me see. Okay, how's that? Has everybody got me?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks for having me, Manos, and hello to everybody on the line today. Excited to talk about the work with you all and for the conversation afterwards. So I'll try to run through this as succinctly as I can. But I do want to start by saying that we are an architectural firm that occasionally develops. We're not developers in this context, but we have in the past worked on a few projects that we initiated on our own, and that work for us are really like thought projects, if you will. And one project in particular, I think the reason why we're involved in this whole thing is one that we call the starter home, essentially. And I've got an agenda up on the screen just to give you a sense of what we were trying to accomplish. But it's a project we started I don't know, about 8 years ago, trying to tackle some issues that we thought were important and critical to address, not just in New Orleans, but throughout the country. But it effectively relied on our ability to sort of find property that was developable that people didn't think was developable at the time. So So we looked around our own city for small lots or accessible lots, categorized those as a whole process. Unfortunately, we didn't have Manos and his team helping us locate all these, so we had to go out and find them on our own in this case. But we're able to find a whole slew of properties that we believed were sort of both accessible but kind of an opportunity within the city itself. But they were all challenging lots. They were small. Typically, we called them they're non-conforming lots, essentially lots that were smaller or irregular or whatever that didn't neatly kind of comply with the zoning ordinance's definition of a standard lot. So we found these all throughout the city. They looked different and were located in odd places. Again, I'm showing you all this just as say that as familiar territory that we've run through, but through identifying those properties and kind of speculating on the capacity that those may have for additional housing in our city, we ended up over the course of about 3 to 5 years developing 17 houses on a series of lots. Some of these we in fact developed on our own. Usually number one, 4 through 15, and 16 through 17. All of those we did on our own. The other we did in partnership with other people. And these aren't, they're not all multifamily. A lot of these are singles and doubles. And I realize the scale of what we're looking at here in LA may be a little bit larger, but I think it's interesting just to show in this context. So, um, and just to run through just a summary of those, the first one on a small sliver of a lot in between a warehouse and an adjacent historic property, it was an infill single family house that we developed for sale. So these were all speculative houses. They weren't custom homes for individuals. We kind of speculated that, again, that these were that there was a market for this, and we found the sort of land to try to utilize that. And so this was the first project that we did, single family house on a tiny lot. Just for scale, the lot itself was about 16 feet wide, and the house with setbacks is 10 feet wide by 45 feet deep. The second project was actually in conjunction with that first. We had met someone who also had bought a small lot and wanted to do something with, and so we helped them develop a set of plans to actually create a self-built home. So this is actually what I'd call for us a micro house. Is about 120 square feet, the smallest permitted house, I think. Currently, still the smallest permitted house in New Orleans, but all self-built. So the person actually lived on site and built this. Another home that we worked on within this group, also on a small lot. This lot configuration was roughly 30 by 35, just to give you a sense of scale. So 30 feet deep and 35 feet wide. Another single family house. We had a partner owner, in this case, not a developer, but someone who purchased the property and asked us to essentially develop it. A larger project that I'll go in a little more detail with in a second, that was a 12 unit development. You can kind of get a sense of context that we were working in here. Kind of historic neighborhoods not too far from the downtown core. And then the last project that we did on our own, in this case just the office, was two houses on, again, two non-conforming lots. And each of these projects, although I'm not highlighting it, we saw, and I think that's what's great about the project we're talking about now, is like aspirational, right? Like these weren't going to necessarily solve the housing problem in New Orleans, but each one we sort of were able to say, hey, there's an agenda that we're trying to reach overall, like starter home, accessible housing, in overly developed neighborhoods, looking for land as a resource and how we can kind of use that to create more opportunities for people. So each project kind of had an idea or a thought underneath the umbrella of that overall objective. And the one project, again, that I think is probably most compatible with what we're looking at in LA here, is what we call St. Thomas and Ninth Street. It's a 12 unit development. It was located in a much bigger site in this case, that zoning allowed for basically 12 units of housing under their multifamily zoning ordinance. If you looked at our lot subdivision regulations, or subdivision regulations in general, which would date back to the 70s, it only permitted 3 lots. And so along with this, or the work that we were doing, we were looking at, how do you sell these? How do you treat them as like fee simple properties, essentially? And so that was our objective, is like how to make it as simple and clean and direct as possible for a home buyer, right? So how do we, provide that? or facilitate that. And so in this case, we had a chance to do 12 units, but the land divisions only allowed for three essentially. And so what we ended up in, as I said, our subdivision regulations were not favorable in this case. And so we ended up challenging that. And I think, what I want to do is kind of quickly walk through this project and just highlight some of the things that we discovered and were able to I'd say, leverage as we walk through this project that I think are potential opportunities that you all may see in your own city. But there were things that I think through some imagination and just some skill, we're able to slight bit of skill that we're able to kind of turn it into a successful project for us. So, and one thing was just property allocation in general. And so, what model, if the regulations didn't permit or allow us to actually have 12 single family buildings on the site as a simple lot, then we turn to the condominium regime in this case. And so we were able to kind of craft a regulatory overlay in this case, or an ownership overlay on the site that comported with the objectives that we had for the project. So what you own and what you didn't own, we defined as part of the condominium regime. And, through that, kind of looking at what the limits were for us in terms of the zoning envelope but also identifying the need that for this thing to work within context, which was sort of light industrial, but also very historic, like 1850s-ish residential. So it's sort of mixed fabric, if you will. And so we had to navigate both of those, and a desire to kind of provide maximum density, but at the same time, really try to mesh it into this fabric. And so this is a final project from overhead you can see here. And a few quick things, as I said, like property allocation, and how we divided the units were really a big part of the way this worked. We wanted each of these to be standalone residences. So this is one thing that I think is one of the major benefits of this, is when we ended up building these as just detached, basically 12 detached units on site. It created a lot of opportunities for us. Like there are, with the condominium regime, we all know as in just both architecture and development, but also in ownership, the sort of fraught nature of a condo organization and regulation. Whenever we, created the detached home, everybody sort of owned their property, and they were no longer kind of contingent on their neighbor. So sort of separating those was a big thing for us. Um, the other thing, when we separated the buildings, we were able to actually use IRC, and so the IBC. So in this context, we weren't, even though we were doing a multifamily project, we leveraged the residential code versus the commercial code, which saved a lot, and it actually made a big difference in how the development worked out. And furthermore, like when you look at the other elements that we think about when we do projects like this, it actually enabled us to kind of independently insure each of the properties. So it wasn't a collective policy in this case. And then even with financing, it turns out that we didn't have to do any bridge financing like you might on a typical multifamily. Is like we didn't have to sell 50 before they could go to perm financing. Actually, because they were all detached, they went straight into permanent financing. And so quickly, I know at the end of my time here, the project, again, 12 units of housing, basically three-story developments, all isolated from one another. It was kind of running through the images, as I said earlier, like the idea that it kind of meshed with context. It was also important for us to say, like, where was your front door? Where was your front porch? How did this project engage with the community and kind of mesh with the housing fabric that was there already? And so these are just kind of a walkthrough. How did it work with that existing fabric? So, again, we were around a lot of warehouses, but how did we embrace that basically? And then again, like how do you make something, in this context that's quite dense, very livable? And we thought part of that was obviously the unit itself, but how that unit communicated with the neighborhood around it. So, and with the residents around it, essentially. So that was, again, as one project I wanted to highlight out of that whole grouping as just, one that I think might have some similarities with what you all are looking at there in LA. So I will stop and allow someone else to grab that.
Thanks, John. Perfect. I think Al, you're up next.
Sorry, I just had to take myself off mute there before I was going to start talking. Yeah, Manos, thanks for the introduction. Really excited to be here. I'll try to go as quick as I can, mindful of time. But yeah, my name is Alkarim Devani. As Manos mentioned, we're kind of on a new path. That for some of you who might not know where Canada is, I'm spending my this month in LA, and it's funny to me where people forget where you're from. So yeah, I am from Canada, from a city called Calgary. What I would say is one of the most progressive missing middle housing policies and cities, I think, in North America. So it's really cold there. We've managed to figure out how to do some pretty creative things. So for those of you that don't know where Canada or Calgary is, I'm happy to chat. And like I said, I'm here till the end of the month in Los Angeles. As Mano said, I've spent my time as a developer most of my career. Started in kind of single family. Everything has been in infill, gone on to do quite large scale projects, the largest being a 212 building with a heritage restoration in a city called Winnipeg, kind of central Canada. But most recently, 18 months ago, we created a new organization called Middle with the goal to kind of expand how do we actually scale this missing middle housing typology. I've done over 300 units personally in missing middle, and it's kind of funny. This T.S. Eliot quote really resonates for me is, I know a lot of folks talk about the scalability, the challenges with this small scale and how you might as well go out and do 212 units. And I think a lot of successful developers do eventually transition, and I've done that. But there's always this false myth that, doing two is the same as 200. And I can tell you through experience, it's not the case. 200 is much more complex and takes a different level of knowledge, skill, risk, along with a number of other things I'd be happy to talk about in more detail. I just want to touch on our model at Middle real quickly. We're doing kind of capacity building, policy innovation, and developer enablement. I'll talk about some of those kind of as I go through. We're supporting over 500 units right now, have supported over 500 units and over $1 billion with our team. And as I've said, I've worked on a number of different projects in a number of different sale and ownership capacities. I'm going to kind of throw up a slew of projects and happy to talk through them. This is the first one for me that I actually did back in 2015. It was prior to Calgary even having a missing middle housing policy or zoning that allowed for it to happen. And so we actually helped with the inception of this policy. And since 2015, Calgary has had over 3,000 applications, I think close to 20,000 units that are on the books for middle housing. So prior to 2015, we didn't have an ordinance that even allowed for this. So this was what was typically allowed to build kind of a duplex on a 6,000 square foot lot. We were able to do 4 units at Strata. These were sale products. And I would say for the first majority of my career, all the stuff that we did was sale until most recently when the federal government announced more rental incentives. And I'll talk a little bit about how that's changed. Biggest lesson learning, you can't see it from this photo, but this is a corner parcel, and the city ended up coming out with policy saying, this unit here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but on the very left, needed to interface the street, which made sense because there were some really bad examples where these would start to show up as slots on corners and didn't really interface the street. I'll kind of speak to how we did that. This is another larger scale project. This was kind of 4 homes originally, all kind of in that 50 by 126,000 square foot parcels. Brookfield Properties actually own this, had an application, went to an appeal board and lost. It took them 3 years and they lost. And then they ended up just like selling every single one of their infill small sites. And so this sat site for 2.5 years because everyone was afraid that you wouldn't be able to solve it. The biggest difference that Brookfield did was they tried to park it as a non-courtyard style, what you see in the finished photo here. And so all the garages were attached through the middle. In Alberta and Calgary and in a lot of Canada, we have alleys and lanes. And so we lane loaded all of the 20 vehicles. And so we kind of kept this courtyard, which was awesome. We also retained this front yard setback to match the single family front yard setback, even though the city was encouraging us to go into this setback. We didn't do it because we didn't want to have any relaxations and we didn't want to have grounds for appeal. So you can imagine this courtyard would get a lot better. You could have a front and a proper backyard, but we recognized by doing that, we would kind of open ourselves up to an unnecessary risk. The other cool thing that we did about this project, which you can't see here, is we were the first project to introduce a waste and recycling system called Moloch. They're underground, kind of buried. The city didn't even have pickup for this. It's basically 3 buried. If you don't know it, they pull these kind of cylinders up, untie the bag, and place them. And so that was in the alleyway. And the big thing for us was we saved, over 60 bins being in this alley because you'd have the residents, when they came out and appealed the project, they would take pictures of the alley. They laid their kids down and said, our kids will die if this many vehicles and all the, waste and recycling that happened. And so we were able to kind of navigate some of those concerns and then successfully deliver this project. One of my favorite, but also lots of lessons. And it's funny because when I was seeing Jonathan's roof lines, like we get tons of, snow buildup in the peaks and valleys, and the ice melts, and so I kind of have like a bit of hesitancy towards high peaks now, even though I've done them before. And so I always have these like, how do you build that? These two projects are just interesting for me because they were right beside each other, one block from each other. This one you could see again, we connected, so no internal courtyard. And surprisingly enough, this project sold first, and actually better than when we did this right on the block behind it. And I think it's because the courtyard, honestly, as I look at it, wasn't really usable. It didn't really give you a great feel. It was very tight. The environment wasn't friendly. From a usability perspective, we thought it was going to really work well, but then you realize 3 stories, you get very little sun. And so sometimes for me, the learning there was like, you really want to assess all the impacts of the architectural moves that you make, and separating the buildings in this turn actually yielded tougher because we couldn't really sell those 2 back units. Took a long time. Manos told me to keep it positive, and I'll do my best. But this project has won, World Architecture Awards. I generally don't post or talk about it because it's one of those like painstaking projects that we barely survived by the skin of our teeth. We probably shouldn't have, but it's 20 units. It was brought to us by an architect firm that was quite young, very, very like innovative in approach. But I would just say probably didn't understand building envelope, building construction, very innovative in terms of approach. But I'm just going to talk about the simple things. So they missed the weight load structurally. And so they weight loaded the garden patches, which were just like, this is not a green roof, it's just gardens planted on top, but they forgot about our snow loads. And so we had to like mid-project rip all the roofs up and add additional snow loads. And then like stupid things like they put this window at the ground floor level. So that unit has 20-foot ceilings, has one window that is like a foot off the ground. And when I asked about like why couldn't this have been a bigger window, it's like, oh, well, architecturally, we just thought it wouldn't really respond well to the outside. So things like that, as a developer, when you're working with architects, like you have to be very mindful of. And I learned a lot about, not just trusting the architect. The biggest takeaway for us is the reason why we were excited about this project to begin with is you're kind of parking everything at grade here. So there was 20 parking stalls. We thought we didn't have to go underground, but then same thing. The city came back, said you need storage units. The only place we could put those was subgrade. So we ended up building a subgrade storage unit for storage for 20 storage lockers, which was essentially the same cost as a parkade. So still a very cool project to be a part of. I think there's lots of lessons that could apply to this scale, but I think my message here is just to be really thoughtful about how you approach some of these architectural moves and making sure the building of those moves can actually work. These 2 projects are just more like iterations of things that we had done. So on the very right side, Mount Pleasant 05 was an 8-unit corner parcel, 12,000 square feet. Really cool. First time 8 units had been done with this district. Again, because it was the first time, it was really wonky. Again, so if you look at the top of the screen on this site plan here, the city made us connect these buildings. They wouldn't let us separate them because the policy didn't actually allow for separation of the built forms. We eventually got that corrected and then built this idea of like, how do you on the left side, West Hillhurst 19, how do you actually create this speaking to both streets? How do we do 2 duplexes? Because the market wasn't responding as well to kind of being connected to 4. These sold extremely well because historically in those neighborhoods, people were building 2 of these on the entire 6,000 square foot parcel, where we figured out how to build 4 kind of 2 duplexes, and they did really well. So again, just understanding like how could we make iterations and changes. This project to me was really cool because it was kind of the precipice of the shift in the market and actually across the country. This was one of the first ones that got approved through a federal funding program, because the feds were trying to finance purpose-built rental projects, and originally no middle housing small scale developers could participate, just couldn't make the finances make sense. We realized that the way that our policy was written is they allowed for secondary suites in every primary unit. And so we were able to get 8 units as of right in this project. You can't see it, but there's a forced kind of condition here where this unit goes downstairs into this kind of basement unit. So we have 4 affordable units kind of in this basement, and then 4 units up top. And then we went on to build, like I said, over 300 of these. They're all purpose-built rental. They all have affordability. On site, you're only parking 4 of the units, which are the townhome units. These are 3-bedroom, generally family orientated. And so all across the country, we start to see middle housing developers starting to kind of benefit from that financing program and really starting to build at this scale, which was really cool to see. So last project I think I'm going to share, it's a response to kind of what's been happening in our city. And I talked to Manos about this, probably important for you folks. It's kind of this idea of like when the scale of the projects that you build start to really resonate in the city and you start to see, sorry, my language, like really shitty examples of it, it makes it really tough in community because you start to get an incredible amount of political pressure from the folks that make decisions. Your building codes start to change the rules and you can kind of feel momentum moving. And so what was happening is, on any lot now since I think last year in Calgary, you can do 8 units as of right on any single family home. And folks were basically like slamming 8 units in really terrible structures and kind of these mid-block scenarios. And so we tested this idea, like, could we get to maybe not 8 units, maybe 6 units, maybe from the street presented as a duplex, but I'll obviously have more units. And this was the first kind of pilot project that we did to kind of resemble that. So it's got two laneway units off the back. And then it's got these 2 family-orientated units up to 4 bedrooms, and then got these basement suites. This was really cool because all the development industry told me it wouldn't work. And what we were able to kind of understand was by doing only 2 primary units, we didn't have any stormwater management requirements. We were able to build under a section of the code that didn't require as much from a fire rating perspective. And when we actually looked at the savings of those costs and the fact that, we had zero community pushback, we sailed this thing through, it actually performs a lot better. And it's unique in terms of what it's offering the market because all those townhomes are kind of topping out at 1,200 square feet. And folks in the inner city who are traditionally, living in these infills wanted bigger units and 4 bedrooms. And so we were able to achieve that in this project. Again, a lesson for me is the city oftentimes is not as fast thinking as we are in certain departments. So policy really understood this and really liked it. But now building code on the second iteration that we're trying to build this is coming back and saying they want full sprinklers for this project, which is essentially just kill it and would make you go back to having to do 8 units as of right. So that's kind of it for me. I think the one thing maybe just because Jonathan was touching on it, and if any of you guys want to chat, I'm happy to share, but we built some GIS tools with the work that we're doing with municipalities where kind of building off what Jonathan's work, we went out and mapped cities, used GIS technology to identify how many homes could actually deliver middle housing. We have 7 cities mapped across the country right now. We're starting to kind of allow for pre-approved plans to be loaded up to our site. So a homeowner can type in an address, someone can type in an address. It's linked to kind of our version of Zillow where you can see what's available, what meets the requirements. And so kind of connecting folks to this type of density faster, quicker. And then we've also built a Performa tool, which allows people to do that. We have a community tool, which allows people to connect and kind of learn from other folks' experiences. We're doing our first modular pre-reviewed approved plan in the city of Kelowna. So a building permit within 10 business days. It'll be fully modular. It's 6 units. And so we're doing a bunch of work across the country. I think it's super exciting. And I think for me, the big thing that I've been really excited about is this idea of, supporting other folks in community to deliver, because I think we need better examples and we need more people working at this scale. So I'll leave it there, Manos. And yeah, happy to chat with any of you offline. Like I said, I'm here for another 10 days.
Great. Thanks, John Perfitt. I think it's you now.
Yeah, greetings to everybody. John Perfitt here with RNLA and Building Blocks, based out of Los Angeles, California. I'll get into profiling a project I think that is pretty relevant because it also includes another panelist that was involved with it. It's a Willowbrook project, but I'll get that into the latter part of my little presentation here. But good to be a part of this. I'm a infill developer that has been working at this for 25 years. I'm also a general contractor. So I try to learn all the dirty little secrets on both sides, both with the developers as well as with the contractors. I used to think construction was easy when I did just pure development, but then I started doing construction and learned that they both have their own difficulties for sure. But we've been involved mostly in LA County and just about all kinds of housing typologies, totaling more than 1,000 units over the last 10 or 15 years. those being large multifamily on larger sites, adaptive reuse projects that are usually housing. We've done some parks and assisted the city with some park development. We focused on about over 300 single family residences on a kind of residential rehab and somewhat of a tear down and new construction program a few years back. Another company that I created about 7 years ago with a friend of mine who now lives in New Orleans, Jason Neville. It's called Building Blocks, which focuses on exclusively ADUs and the building of ADUs, but also fully integrated in that it will design, permit, engineer, and build accessory dwelling units, which is really taken off, I'm sure everybody knows, in California over the last few years. We've also had some experience with building multifamily on smaller scale sites, or smaller sites, I should say. And I'm going to profile one of those projects because we've done a few of them recently. I also want to add that I have some experience, probably about 10 units total that have been done as modular, prefab, whatever you want to call it. We've done structurally insulated panels, sort of those tilt up. We've done it via cranes and rolled off. In the spirit of keeping things positive, I've always rooted from the sidelines, although I'm getting more and more involved these days with prefab again, that it would be that sort of killer application of better, faster, cheaper for housing, specifically infill housing. But I don't think that has been realized yet. But again, I support it and sort of rooting for it here in the Los Angeles market. We've also had some experience where one of the crazies that get involved with what I call, some people call it naturally occurring affordable. I call it street affordable. It's the primary housing stock as far as for most people in the city of Los Angeles and probably the county of Los Angeles as well. So those are those kind of triplexes and quads that could be expanded using a variety of different local laws as well as state laws to create new units. So we've been working on several initiatives on that over the last few years. Myself, I've worked on, I'm quite schizophrenic, I like to joke, because I've been on the public sector side for more than 10 years. I've worked on the nonprofit side, the for-profit side. I worked in redevelopment, which is sort of a little bit wanting to be both private sector or harness some of the capacity of the private sector, but also, being chartered as a, public sector entity. Doesn't really exist in California anymore, but it did exist for a long time. It was called redevelopment. I also taught at USC school, Price School for 15 years, urban planning, the School of Urban Planning, basically. Mostly taught finance and development finance to graduate students in the planning programs there. So that's just a little bit about sort of the history of RNLA, Building Blocks, and me. I would just like to do a quick run through a project that I worked on and has been operating for about a year and a half. And this is one where we're taking small sites and trying to make as much multifamily as we can. We kind of call it sensible density in that we don't want to go for any kind of discretionary actions from the city of Los Angeles because that's super expensive and super time consuming. So we like to find sites that can either, you can maximize the density without any kind of discretionary actions using the off-the-shelf by right density bonuses and things like that. So the project I want to show you is a project called Willowbrook. It's a 7-unit permanent supportive housing project for the homeless. And it was a small, kind of a little bit funky shaped site. Hopefully everybody can, Manos, can everybody see the screen? I think
Yeah,
they can.
seems like it.
That's it, yeah. Approximately 500 square feet next to a church. You can see the layout here. It's just sort of kind of very linear layout with the units on the, I believe it's the north side of the site. Created a little small kind of multi-purpose area, meeting area and so forth for tenants / community room. And then an office. One of the things that's required, this actually functioned more as an office, not as storage. One of the things that's required for permanent supportive housing is that you have you don't have a manager on site with 7 units, at least in California, and you don't have on-site social services, but you have to bring those in, and you need a certain amount of office space to ensure privacy and meetings and proper accommodations for the social workers as well as the clients. So let me just go through. This is a kind of a drone shot of the project upon completion. So you can see this is the, if I get my annotate pen here quickly, maybe not. But yeah, if you can see my cursor, this is the community room here, and then the units are here. Units are about 300-ish square feet, each of them. And there's some limited, we've since built out the back courtyard with more shade, more trees, and picnic tables and the like, and a designated smoking section, of course. And there's some looks from some of the corridors of the project. Look at the community room. We had to do parking. There was, believe it or not, we fought that, but it's functionally not working as parking. We had to do ADA accessible parking. You can see the interlocking pavers and so forth, sort of contrasting. It's located, it's near what used to be called the Blue Line here in Los Angeles. So it's kind of a transit-oriented project. You can see a picture of it there, and you can see in the background that we tried to kind of the Baptist church is here on the corner. We tried to take some cues from that and do sort of the steeple that you have on the corner there. A couple more. There's a good look at a unit and the walkways they're in. It's all xeriscape. A lot of stuff has grown in since there. I shouldn't say all xeriscape, but it's very drought tolerant with a combination of lot more trees that have come in over the last year and a half too, as well, in terms of providing shade canopy. Just a quick walk through some of the photos of the project. But yeah, that I told Manos 5 minutes. I take him at his word. I'm going to leave it there. These are the type kind of indicative of a project that we get involved with. We're sort of a rare breed in Los Angeles. And let me just talk quickly about this project quickly to maybe segue into Tom DeSimone, who's going to speak, is that these type of projects are there's not a lot of scale on them. There's not a lot of profit in them. They run at very, very, very thin margins. And there are not a lot of lenders that are interested in this. There's a lot of lenders that will tell you that they are. There are very few that are actually serious about it. And Genesis LA is one. And Genesis LA provided the initial financing for this pre-development, and they morphed their loan into a long-term mortgage as well. And Tom could speak more about this. This was predicated on the ability to get the financing for this was predicated on being able to get a long-term master lease with the County Department of Health Services, which we were able to secure before the project. And that was sort of, if you will, the security that would allow a niche lender that like Genesis LA to be able to lend on this. So that's what allowed it to happen. But for that master lease but for a creative and proven lender and sort of niche lender like Genesis, this project would have never happened. And so I'll hand it over to Tom, I think, Manos, unless that's your job and I'm doing it for you.
No, you did. That's good. Go ahead, Tom. Finish it off.
Sounds good. Let's see if I can share screen here. All right. Well, thanks, John. I'll touch a little bit on what you just shared too. Nice to be with everybody. Again, I'm with Genesis LA. We are a nonprofit community loan fund, also called a CDFI. We do direct lending as well as new markets tax credits, and we provide a lot of collaborative support with our partners. Sometimes they're entrepreneurial developers, in the way that John said, really, where are these gaps in the system as it relates to finance and others to bring development to lower income communities. Since our inception, we've financed probably close to 50 small scale housing projects with 25 or fewer units. These are from homes up to multifamily properties. Probably more of them have been renovations, rehabs than not, but we've done about 20 new construction projects that I think are applicable to the small sites challenge or project that cityLAB is spearheading. And these have been from a single family home, like you see here. This was actually a project we did with John Perfitt and Lair Architects from some foreclosed homes or properties during the Great Recession that were repurposed through different federal funds as starter homes for folks, to EDUs, which here's an image of a accessory dwelling unit that we did with a group that's now called Office of Office and the Los Angeles Mayor's Office before the state changed a lot of the ADU laws to liberalize development. This was a pilot project to try to lift up where are all the kinks in the system so that policy reform, development reform could happen. So this happened at the time that was naturally happening in the state legislature. We also pursued a development. This is the project John just shared, but it was part of a larger initiative that we called Rethink Housing, which is really inspired to take many of the state's land use reforms and apply them to small sites that were kind of the leftover development opportunities in the city and turn them into affordable housing. We were taking it from a rental perspective. I know there's a desire to do home ownership with this project, but I think a lot of similarities still. And really trying to say, how can we bring affordable housing from 50 plus unit tax credit developments on your corridors to these smaller infill sites that frankly are a much larger share of the geography in our city and many other cities, and how to do that. So this Rethink Housing initiative, there were 3 or 4 other projects just like this that John had already shared. This is that Willowbrook project. And we worked with Lair Architects on most of these projects as well. And really a strategy or a lesson learned, I think, for us was we approached this from a team that could kind of go from site to site. So we provided capital, John provided development and construction expertise. We had the same architect. We replicated some of the unit layouts from project to project. And so this kind of one-stop shop approach helped to cut through some of the uncertainty as well as translate the collective learning from project to project to project and be a little bit better at it with each project that you turn to. These projects were small, they were studio units, but to John's credit and the team's credit, these were delivered for low to mid $200,000 a unit compared to something like $600,000 or $700,000 for studios through our traditional affordable housing finance system. These are very small, probably smaller than a homeownership unit would be, around 350, 400 square feet. But a sense of how you can maybe drive down costs on these smaller sites. We've also been some renderings of or images of the inside, as you had seen earlier. We've also been doing some projects. This is a design from Off Top Design, another local architect who we've been working with. We have 2 projects with them. This is actually a SB9 development. So the house on the right, you can see the little craftsman style home was there. And the backyard is being converted into 2 additional units. Conveniently, it's on a corner, so we can access from the side street. But really going through the SB9 legislation to try to apply more density in a context that we can hopefully sell these. We have been also working with a local credit union, or a national credit union has a presence here, to develop a tenant in common loan product, because at least as SB9 works now, we can't actually subdivide each of these 3 homes to be conveyed separately through a traditional fee simple mortgage. And so we've been working with a credit union on a tenant in common product that we intend to pilot on this, as well as the second project we're working on with them on. This is on Figueroa, so a much higher zoned corridor, but a very tiny lot. This lot is just over 4,000 square feet. Had a little house on it before, and it'll be repurposed as 6 flats for starter homes. So I a few lessons. I'm not the architect in the room, and much of this might be obvious to some, but we tried when we first did a lot of this work. We looked at the kind of pre-war housing typologies in LA and the things that people love so much, the courtyard buildings, the bungalow garden courts, and really tried to bring a lot of that in. And it helped cut costs, not having podiums, using all of the tools in place to reduce or eliminate parking, kind of keeping your outdoor circulation, avoiding lobbies and podiums and things. And that is obviously needed at this scale of development, especially if you're trying to increase some density, and is a key to making the costs work. And this, for the private developers who might be listening into this would seem obvious perhaps, but in affordable housing development, we have this layering of financing that just creates infinite complications and costs increases. And so, really even in the small context in particular, and even when trying to do affordable housing, a key to making this work is simplifying your capital stack. So to the point John said, we knew that early on, and we said, we'll provide one debt instrument. John brought in some subsidy, and what is affordable housing looked much more like a private for-profit development undertaking when it came to the financing. Debt, equity, move forward. And that's not how most affordable housing works. And so I think an interesting part of this small lots program will be trying to kind of stitch together more traditional ways of financing development, but through a social initiative like this. And so we've been working with cityLAB to try to help with that in some ways, and including looking at some pre-development capital, which is not locked down yet, but we hope to be able to bring to the table as an extra tool to move these projects forward. So I will stop with that and hand it back to you, Manos.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. Super, super interesting, and a lot of really great information, I think. Again, we'll put this on our website for people who were furiously taking notes or want to refer back to things. Maybe just a couple of general questions. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but I think something it pulled from your presentation, Jonathan Tate, and then also was something that everyone was talking about. But a lot of the houses, let's say, or the units that we saw were kind of smaller than usual, or I don't know, more unusually shaped, let's say, than what people might traditionally think there'd be strong demand for. But I guess I wonder, did you find that there was a lot of demand for the units you were building, both yourself and Al in Canada and Tom and John here in LA, that sort of would give people some, I don't know, confidence, let's say, that even these smaller units are going to be things that people want, and that homeowners are gonna want to have as they buy their first home, let's say, or move up the housing ladder?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I can start there. I would say generally, like the units, and again, we didn't make that many. 17 isn't really that many units overall, but like there were always takers. There were, and I think what people were attracted to in these cases was like the livability of the plan. And so paying, as if we're like looking at lessons learned, it's like paying close attention to how people inhabit these. And by virtue of like, if it's a small footprint, what are the other things that you're trying to, I use the word leverage a lot, but leverage on site. So like access to outdoors that make, smaller rooms feel larger, things like that. I mean, these are all, kind of inherent in what we do as architects, but I think critical when you're working at this scale and trying to get as much density on a site as you can, which often means that you're reducing the kind of traditional footprint of a home. But yeah, there was, I think, again, people don't walk in there and say, wow, this feels small. They're looking at the intangibles as well, and like, what's it like to live in this place? So no issues there.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, I live in one, so I can, maybe I'm a little biased, but yeah, I can say firsthand that as a family of four, that we have no problems living there. So
Nice.
Yeah, I'd probably just echo what Jonathan says. I also live in one, and that's the great part of being able to test kind of your own theses. And what I would say for ourselves is like we're in communities that are highly connected and have generally strong amenities and strong foundation of those amenities. And so part of it is a cultural change. There's no question of like, how do you convince existing homeowners who have single family, homes, who generally lived in larger homes to live in smaller homes? And I think often where that resonates is with their children and the proximity to their children, or the distance to where their children need to live, or do their children even have housing. And so what I would say is like, that idea of family multi-generational housing isn't new. A lot of the forms that we're exploring, it's not like they've never been built before. They have been. It's just they haven't been allowed to be built now in a meaningful way. And so I think, Manos, like from a cost perspective, it makes a ton of sense. And then when you think about building in complete communities, people start to change the ways in which they commute and live. And I think it takes time. And I know a lot of us are looking to move it faster than it may be moving, but I think as things start to build momentum, you start to see that change and shift start to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe one other kind of general question, and I don't know if this is too broad, but we'll see. Is a lot of you guys, I mean, Al, you were talking about projects where you decided to sort of leave some potential development envelope open with the idea to sort of avoid constraints, let's say later on with the city. Tom, you and John were talking about some of those as well, trying to kind of chart maybe the most like lubricated path, let's say, through city agencies, but leaving something on the table. I wonder just to some degree, like how do you think about that? Is the way that you're making those decisions really oriented towards kind of avoiding things that are going to slow the project down? Is it oriented towards sort of generating as much revenue as possible, let's say, from the project and making the finances work? When you're thinking about those trade-offs, I guess I'd be interested to know sort of what's front of mind as you're making those decisions.
Well, I can say both on a micro scale and a macro scale that there are so many forces working against getting stuff built here in the city of Los Angeles that if you can eliminate them by not having to go through any kind of entitlement process, you're already going to be up against a lot. So eliminating that is just done. I wish I could give you this sophisticated model that it's smarter to not do that. But having been through those, and then even bringing it down to a smaller scale, we build and permit a lot of ADUs, and it's not known oftentimes amongst my friends in cities and so forth that there are too many pathways, but two primary pathways to permit ADUs, which are by right product in the city of Los Angeles and every city in California. You can use the state route or you can use the local route.
Yeah.
So we just sort of optimize that pathway because it's hard. It's very hard, and I took an oath to keep it positive, but development is really hard. And
Yeah.
their surprising thing is that it's supposed to be getting easier when you get these new laws that come down from the state and otherwise, and it becomes more complicated because there's no one, and Tom talks very eloquently about this, about there's no one really deducting anything from the code, if you will, or taking a look at that. And that needs to be done because there's a lot of conflict in there. So I think it's just it's a practical measure, Manos, to avoid these things. We made a conscious with Rethink, with what Tom was talking about. We made a conscious effort is that we would maximize everything as long as we could do it, with these off the table by right incentives that existed.
Sure.
Yeah, I would just layer on that in California, it seems like so much is by right now, but there's actually these incentive options, and you get so many of them. And once you go past a certain number or use certain ones, there is some level of approval. It's almost a de facto, but it adds time and cost and some uncertainty. And so we try to avoid those. The second thing is the plan check process is still, and I'm sure there's many developers and contractors on this call, the plan check process is still very fraught. And so like trying to use prototypical units or models or things that have gone through before that have kind of passed the sniff test and trying to utilize that a little bit over and over, I think is another strategy to build in as much certainty as you can in a fairly uncertain process still.
Well, and if I could just add one more thing, and that's, I think it's an important point. I appreciate the perspectives on that. I mean, for us too, as expediency is like looking for, a path forward that didn't involve, layers and layers and layers of approvals. And what that resulted in our mind were replicable models versus things that were one-off that you managed to, make happen here, but, without this Herculean effort, it's not going to happen anywhere else. And so if the goal is to sort of illustrate what you can do and do it in a way that you could do it somewhere else, that's what we had top of mind. So
yeah, that makes sense. There's one maybe general question here. I know it's literally at noon, so if people on the panel need to go, that's fine. I can sort of answer this one, and then we can answer the rest of these offline. But there's a question about kind of why someone might engage with the small lots initiative in and of itself and sort of not go towards private lots. Another question about some of the help that we're hoping to put together, Tom, kind of financially. So I think probably the first answer is that we are trying to pre-solve as many problems as we can that we know from the people on the call and sort of our conversations and working with the city are likely to come up. So thinking through paths to kind of avoid public project requirements as much as we can to make sure these little projects are actually able to be built, working through pro formas more in detail. We're hoping to share some more of that actually later this fall, some more of that kind of modeling with folks, providing as much, a little bit of at least some pre-development funds to get people started, using this kind of land sale model where the city is actually going to sell the land to the winning teams as a way to subsidize some affordable units on the back end. So we have this approach to kind of almost like self-subsidized, let's say, raise money to then be able to provide affordability. That's just and I guess maybe the last thing to say is our connections with both the mayor's office and LAHD, the ability to actually make these projects move through entitlements a little faster because of public land. There are all of these ways in which we're trying to grease the wheels as much as we can. And really actually to show how you can do it first on this public lots and trying to model how you would do it on private land too. So it'll be, I'm sure it'll be a little bit more complicated to work through this initiative and to try to help do what we're doing with the city. But I think that the payoff is going to be really great, and we're trying to solve as many of those problems as possible first.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll agree. Go
Manos,
ahead.
I just wanted to add that, like, I think, as a small scale developer, the two things that you're providing is the ability to like tie up a lot and work through the pre-development process, which many of us don't get the opportunity to do on the private sale. Like we have to make a commitment, but you're allowing people to decide, 12 months in advance whether or not they can make it work once they're awarded, which is massive, right? Because there isn't this layout of capital aside from your pre-dev work, but you don't have to close on a lot and then find out you're stuck 5 years down the road. And so I think that's a huge, huge benefit. And then having your team connected not only into the, getting to the zoning, and I know the inspection and building process is something that you guys will get towards, but having Tom and his team on a financing and certainty of project are massive. And so I think like, to me, again, pitching on your behalf, I think having a team like cityLAB's on small lots and having those two to be able to figure out whether or not this scale can work in California is a huge upside. And so we haven't had those opportunities, and organizations like yourself didn't exist, when we were trying to carve through on our own and wait 4 years, 5 years to build 20 units. Like I know that, like I said, it's incremental, but having this to me is a tremendous opportunity based on, again, just those two alone, let alone all the other things you guys are working towards.
Thanks, Sal. That's kind, and I appreciate it. We do. We all appreciate it. I think we'll probably call it there. I know we're a couple minutes over. We'll go through the Q&A and try to answer as much of those questions after the fact. We'll upload a document to the website. Thanks, obviously, to the four of you guys for joining. Thanks. I didn't mention this at the beginning. I should have, to our sponsors too, BMO and LA for LA, and also to the rest of the team that works on this. It's not just me. Ryan and Cora and Dana are the people that have been helping push this through too. So yeah, we'll update this on the website. We'll put the recording up soon. And thanks everyone. Stay tuned for other stuff that we're sharing about small lots. We appreciate it.